Hello guys, my name is Ephraim.
My name's Roisin.
And I'm Chris.
And tonight we're about to interview a very special guest. If any of you guys have seen the movie The Conjuring, the family that went through that actually came up front and said that all those events were true. And we're about to interview the eldest daughter of the Perron family, Andrea. She was kind enough to grant us an interview, and we're about to bring her aboard so we can talk to her about what happened and the real life events that transpired.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi,
How's it
Andrea.
going?
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to finally meet you and get to talk to you.
I'm so glad. Here, let me try to. All right, tell me how the audio or the video is.
It's great.
It's great. We can see you perfectly and hear you perfectly.
Oh, good. I'm so
Well,
glad.
As you know me. I'm Ephraim. These are my two friends who wanted to join us.
I'm Chris. Nice to meet you.
And I'm Roisin.
It's lovely to meet both of you, all of you actually. Ephraim's a friend of mine who's been for a while on Facebook, and just as sweet. I could just, hug you in cyberspace. She's such a sweet, precious man.
He is a good guy.
Yeah.
I tried to add you, but I think I got in a little too late as you're packed.
Oh, no, I'll kick a cousin to the curb and bring you in. All the time.
Well, Andrea, as you know, was fascinated with your story ever since I saw the movie, which was about 2 years ago. And it wasn't until after a couple months after I saw it, which I started looking deeper into the story and what really happened. And one day, I thought, let me add her and see what happens. And there we are. Here we are,
Yeah. People are often shocked because they think somebody as, quote, famous as I am would never interact with my readers. Well, that's the whole point, I mean, what's the point of, telling such an intimately personal story and then not sharing it and interacting and engaging with the people who are touched by it?
Right.
That seems so counterproductive to me, and I don't understand writers who are so reclusive that they never go out amongst their followers. That just seems totally counterproductive to me. I mean, you were shocked when you know said, I'd love to do an interview with you, and I was like, yeah, sure, fine.
Yeah, I really was. I was like, wait a minute, I'm not a paranormal investigator, I'm not a radio host. But it's cool that you actually get to take the time out of your busy schedule to talk to an actual reader or fan. And as you can see, because of me, I made these two guys are your fans also.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in what you went through and like the paranormal and stuff like that. Some of my friends and I have actually been on some.
Yeah, he's one of my ghost hunting buddies actually.
Yeah, we've been on our own little investigations. Nothing too big, but we're trying to go on.
I mean, there's some local spots around here that we've gone to. I mean, just for the fun of it, because it's very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And she's actually reading the first volume. I let her borrow it.
Absolutely fabulous. Oh my goodness. It's the way it's written as well is just absolutely beautiful. Like, I love like different writing styles and stuff, and yours is absolutely fabulous. I'm not too far into it now, but so far it's amazing.
Well, all I can say is prepare yourself. That's all I'm gonna say. But anyways, we have like a handful of questions. I don't know how long this is gonna take, but it's a lot of information. I know, Andrea, after seeing your interviews, you can talk for hours, and same here. I would love to hear as much as you have to say.
Okay.
So, first question is, tell us about the time it was before you moved into the house. How did the whole farm come into play?
I love your cat, by the way. Your black cat is gorgeous, and I think the cat loves me because it keeps coming to the door. You can certainly let him in, or
do you want me to go get her?
It's a her?
Yeah, Panda is her name. We have two. We have two black ones, Panda and Louie is the more shy one.
I love how the cat just like
Give me
came into the
just a
picture.
Oh no, the cats are absolutely welcome to come. I'm totally into anything cat.
Don't you have a cat?
I do, but I actually 3 cats, but I don't have them where I'm living.
Look.
Hello, gorgeous.
Oh.
Hello, gorgeous, beautiful kitty.
Oh.
Yeah,
So
I have a thing for black cats. Ain't that
Yeah,
right, baby?
too. I had one named Elliot, and I had him for 21 years.
Wow.
He
21
was
years.
full grown when I rescued him.
I didn't even know a
I
cat.
had him for 21 years.
Cats
Yeah.
can't live that long.
I didn't know a cat can live that long.
Do you want to go
seriously.
back outside? Alright, go ahead.
Normally, cats do not live that long. He was a magical kitty.
That's
I swear he was
I
amazing.
bet.
And
Yeah. But
okay,
anyways.
let me fill you in. Just give you some brief oversight. You've obviously read the books, so
Yeah.
you know what I'm about to tell you.
Yes.
Is that we were living in Cumberland, Rhode Island, and everything was fine there for the longest time. And then things started to change, and the boys in the neighborhood were becoming little budding criminals. And, you know, these were our playmates, these were our schoolmates, these were our neighbors. And started doing some horrific things.
Right.
And my mother, including breaking into our house while we were away, destroying our house, killing my cat in the middle of the road, my beautiful Scrunch, who I adored, and then our dog, Bathsheba, that my mother named Bathsheba. So weird.
Ironic.
You know, I mean, none of us had ever heard that name before when she named the dog that, and so we just abbreviated it to Sheba, because we didn't know what that name was, where it came from, or what it meant.
Right.
But that she plucked that name out of the ether and named our dog Bathsheba was just bizarre, which is why I included it in the book. You know, because what I wanted people to have was a sense of everything that happened prior to us moving to the farm had to happen exactly the way that it did in order for us to be catapulted to that property.
Do you think possibly something to do with spirits or what you encountered at the house had to do with why the dog was named Bathsheba?
Well, my mother named our dog Bathsheba 3 years
Yeah.
before we even thought of moving to the farm or knew that the farm existed.
Wow.
Do you think something was connected beforehand, before you even moved there?
Yes, I do. I do feel that way. Honestly, I do. And I don't know what it is to this day. I mean, I just turned 57 in October, and I don't know any more about it now than I did when I was 11 years old, and we went to the farm for the first time, and my mother found the place, and she did something that was very out of character for her. She found it in an advertisement in a local newspaper, and called the realtor at like 9:30 at night, which is really rude back in 1970.
Yeah.
Now it was really rude back then.
Yeah.
And went to see the house first thing that next morning and emptied our family bank account to put earnest money down to save that house from being sold out from underneath her.
Yeah.
Wow.
And my father kind of hit the roof when he came home and said, "How do we get the check back? You know, we can't do this. We can't afford this. We've only been in this house for 5 years. It doesn't even have any equity built up in it yet. No, we can't do this, Carolyn." And my mother's like, "Just, you know what? Just go look at it. Just come look at it. And then if like the answer is absolutely not, then I'll find a way to get the money back."
Right.
You know? So we all piled into the car and went up to the farm and all met Mr. Kenyon, who was the current owner at the time. And my father fell as in love with it as my mom did. And we certainly did. And Mr. Kenyon fell in love with our family and moved heaven and earth to make sure that we got the farm. And interestingly, it wasn't until they got to the closing, which didn't even happen until December.
Right.
It took all those months for, you know, everything to fall into place and for them to scrounge up the money to put the down payment. Mr. Kenyon dropped the selling price of the house by $5,000.
Wow.
So that could get it. I mean, if he could have given it to us, he would have. And it wasn't until the closing that they realized, Mrs. Herzog, who was the realtor, told my mother that her call came on the first day that the farm was advertised, and that there were never any more calls on the farm, that they ran that ad. You know, they had a block of time that they bought to run that ad, and they ran it for, I don't know, 3 months or something like that.
Right.
And no other calls ever came in on that property to look at that property.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
something
I know.
Did
might
you?
have been influencing.
Yeah. Like, did you, before you guys moved in, did you ever see the farm? Like, did y'all visit it?
Yes,
Okay.
frequently, several times, a number of times.
How?
And we just loved it. We loved it. We loved Mr. Kenyon. He loved us. It was a match made in heaven.
Was there anything off when you first started trying to go in there, or was it just a perfectly normal house?
It was a perfectly normal house. There was no activity that any of us, and I did ask that question of virtually every member of my family, and nobody remembered feeling, sensing, seeing anything of a supernatural nature at that farm until the day we moved in and were official owners. The day that we couldn't back out of the deal.
The day that it was yours, you know?
Yes.
What did you?
And
I'm sorry,
as
Andrew.
soon as we arrived and we moved in the middle of a snowstorm. Oh God, that was wild. It seemed like it took forever to get there because everyone was crawling, swirling snow and ice pellets hitting your face at 30, 40 miles an hour. It was like, you know, you're from the north, you know how the weather can be.
It's already getting cold over here.
Finally.
Yeah.
My father opened up the back of the van and he handed me a box and said, "Take this to your mother in the kitchen." I walked in the parlor door, which was the closest door to where I was, and then took a right-hand turn to go toward the kitchen, which meant that I had to pass through the dining room. And Mr. Kenyon was in the dining room packing up the last of his belongings from the built-in china cabinet. And I said good morning to him. And then I said good morning to the man that was standing in the corner of the room watching Mr. Kenyon. And he did not acknowledge me at all. And I remember distinctly thinking, do people dress like that here? Because he was dressed very oddly even for the, you know, for the 70s. You know, he was dressed oddly. Even in the hippie freak times, he was dressed oddly. But he appeared absolutely solid to me, that I could have literally walked up and touched him. And I was polite to him, and I said good morning, and nothing. Absolutely nothing. Excuse me. And so I went into the kitchen, and I said, "Mom, who's that man with Mr. Kenyon?" And she said, "There's nobody with Mr. Kenyon. His son's on the way. He's not here yet." Like, there's somebody with Mr. Kenyon. And, you know, but it was chaos. It was busy, and, you know, the people coming and going, lots of activity, and I just let it go. And then Christine walked into the kitchen. She's like, "Mom, who's that man with Mr. Kenyon?" My mother's like, "What? Not here yet." And she's like, "Okay, but there's," and, you know, Mom's like, "Okay, go get another box. Go get another box." You know, I mean, there was no time to discuss this.
Yeah.
It wasn't on our radar. You know, nobody was expecting. It never even occurred to us that we might be moving in a haunted house. We were little kids. We didn't even have a concept of that.
Yeah.
And then Cindy walked into the kitchen. She's like, "Mom, there's this really weird-looking man with Mr. Kenyon." And my mother's like, "No, there's not." And then Nancy walked in, and she leans over to Cindy, and she's like, "Did you see that man with Mr. Kenyon?" Just disappeared. And that was our introduction.
Wow.
Four of the five of us saw him with Mr.
So-
Kenyon
so-
that day.
That's
April is
crazy.
the only one that didn't. And
Wow.
my father, at one point, and this is how I knew things were really odd.
Mm-hmm.
Father walked into the parlor to talk to Mr. Kenyon, and he didn't see the apparition, but we did.
Wow.
And did that like fade over time, or have you been able to see like apparitions your whole life? Like, did that fade as you get older? Because you know the way like children's minds are more open, you know, and children's imaginations are like more open, and they can kind of see more.
Well, I'm going to mention your comment to the ghost that lives in this house.
Oh, we've got one here too.
Yeah, I mean, I just this afternoon. I just saw him this afternoon.
Really?
Yeah.
Really pleasant, perfectly nice. Doesn't cause me any trouble, but can be very loud in the middle of the night. Very loud. And I can't. I don't know why he does that. I'm gonna smack him. But
But one question I have.
once you have that, I'll just finish that thought, sweetheart. Once you have that kind of experience, it stays with you for your whole life.
Yeah.
It also opens the door to that experience. I tell people all the time, once the door to the netherworld is kicked wide open, you might as well have just taken it off the hinges, because it will never close again. And once the human mind expands and your consciousness of the existence, of the awareness of spirit happens, you can't unthink it. You can't unlearn it. Once a mind expands, it cannot retract.
Right.
And so all of us, to answer your question specifically, all of us have had numerous encounters with spirit since we moved to the farm, even after we left it. And we thought that by leaving the farm, I don't want to give away too much of volume 3 because I want you to read it, but when we left the farm, we thought that that was it, that we were leaving them behind. And nothing could have been further from the truth.
Yeah.
Wow. I think one of the main things I want to ask is, after that first incident when you all first moved in, was it immediately after that accident that more stuff started happening the next day, or did it take a while afterwards?
It started right away. It really did. Well, we saw the apparition that my sister Nancy named Manny, because she was only a little kid and not really inventive with names, and he was a man, so that seemed to fit him somehow. Pretty sure that it was actually Johnny Arnold, who he was, because Johnny Arnold in the 1800s drank horse liniment, probably to get drunk because it had such a high alcohol content, and ingested too much of it, and it killed him. The death was listed as a suicide, and maybe I never had a sense that it was suicide. I thought it was accidental, but his death certificate listed it as a suicide, and I'm thinking perhaps the reason why is because the coroner would have assumed that he knew that it was poison that he was drinking. So, but I always, I had a close kind of thing with him, and he showed up at the house a lot. We referred to him as more like a member of the family. And I never had a sense that he tried to kill himself. It was, I always presumed it was accidental, and I don't care what the coroner's report says. I think it's incorrect.
So over time, you basically started to get used to seeing certain spirits and apparitions and stuff like that?
Yes. In fact, I don't know if you've read the books yet, Christopher, but that's a phrase that I use repeatedly in the books. We got used to it. We were sharing space with characters, really, with entities, with beings that were from another realm, but it was their place first. It was their home first. And so we we were very respectful of that. We were really the intruders to them. They looked at us like we were the ghosts. Um, and, other than the one apparition that continually, the entity that continually threatened my mother, for the most part, we got along fine with them. There was some kind of what Keith Johnson likes to say was some demonic activity in the house. I don't know what a demon is. I've never seen a demon. I don't know if that's, we're mislabeling as mere mortals, mislabeling something. I do know that there's pure, unadulterated evil in the world.
Yeah.
And I saw some of that in the house. But I hesitate to call it a demon because I don't think there's anybody on this planet that knows what a demon is. I think that it is a manifestation of our own fear.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there is I don't believe in the devil. I don't, I don't believe in the devil. I think that that's something religion made up to keep us all fear-based and keep us under control. But that's just my own personal opinion. But I do know that there is evil in the world as a counter to goodness. And I know that good always conquers evil. It always triumphs over it, because if it didn't, none of us would be here anymore. When you think about the people on this planet right now that are wreaking havoc, ISIL and Al-Qaeda and, all these groups that are wreaking havoc on the planet, really they're a very small handful of people compared to the 7.2 billion of us that want to live in peace and want to, are loving, pure, generous, kind, giving human beings that just want their children to do better than them, that just want to live a happy, peaceful life, and that's all they want. And I think that's the vast majority of human beings. And I think that ultimately we will defeat evil, but it serves a purpose in that it helps us distinguish between the two. We know, the moral lesson for us is we know what is right and what is wrong. The indiscriminate claiming of human life is wrong. It's evil, and it has to be stamped out. And it will be. It will be. I really think that we're, as a race consciousness, we're turning the corner now. I really do believe that, or I don't see any reason for me to be here anymore.
I believe that too. Yeah. Okay, so
I'm doing my part. I'm spreading the light and love. You trust me when I tell you.
Yeah.
Right? Doing my part.
You're one of the few nice people around, still around. They probably don't know about the situation that occurred with your mother, and I haven't really explained to them that much about it. But we'll let you tell us about what your mother exactly went through in that house, and how it still affects her to this day. How bad?
Well, it took me 1,500 pages to tell that whole story, so I'll have to give you a severely condensed version. But I will tell you that there was a spirit in the house. We think it was most likely not Bathsheba Sherman. It was most likely Mrs. John Arnold, who died before Bathsheba was born. Bathsheba Sherman never lived in the house. If all you've ever seen, I tell folks all the time, if all you've ever seen of our story is The Conjuring, then you don't know anything at all about our story. The Conjuring was conjured up in the minds of two screenwriters who tried to tell as much of the truth as possible, and the head honchos at Warner Brothers told them, no. This is a situation where the truth is stranger than fiction, and it will run people out of the theaters. You have to tone this down, tone it down, tone it down. They sent that screenplay back for revisions 7 times before they actually picked up a camera and started. So in the big picture, yes, they got it right. It's impossible to compress 10 years into 2 hours. But in the big picture, they got it right. Good conquers evil, love conquers fear, and the Perron family had an extreme haunting that they all survived. All of that is correct. There are elements of truth splattered all throughout the movie. But there's not a single scene in that film that came directly from the books, not one. Um, they made it up as they went along because they didn't give the viewing public credit for having enough intelligence and sensitivity to watch the real story unfold. But to me, that's a blessing because now I'm in negotiation and ready to contract with a major motion picture studio to make 3 films out of the 3 books. And the world will know the whole true story when I'm done, and I'm writing the screenplay for it.
Really?
Wow.
It can't be screwed up. Not any way can it be screwed up.
When did you start on that, actually? How long ago did you start writing?
In October.
Oh, okay.
Last
Oh, nice.
October.
That's incredible. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be the first one to see it.
I'll be there for it.
Yeah. So back to your mother. As we all know, she went through a lot. How does she feel about it to this day? And does she like to talk about it or no?
Well, it's not something that she likes to talk about, but it is something that she will talk about. You know, she had to divulge a lot and relive a lot to tell her side of things. You know, I've always described the trilogy as a collective memoir, even though I wrote it. Every member of my family contributed mightily to it with their own recollections. And I spent countless hours interviewing each member individually, talking together in groups. And one day my mother said to me, you know, it's amazing. We spent more than 30 years trying to bury our dead from the farm. And yet when it came time to exhume them, it's amazing how close to the surface they were buried. We never forgot anything. Nobody ever forgot anything. It was like it was just impaled in our minds, in our hearts, in our souls, scrolled across our souls. Our memory is just as sharp about it now as when it happened. And I think when something that striking, that stunning, that shocking happens to you, you either put it completely out of mind or you remember it precisely. And that's what happened to us. You know, I do a lot of interviews and I tell people, I don't care what you believe or don't believe. It's not your experience to believe in. I don't know if I hadn't had the experiences myself and seen this happen with my family, I don't know if I would believe this story. I don't know. I can't honestly say that I would blanketly accept it.
Yeah.
But because I lived it, I do know. And it's not my job to convince anybody else of what did or did not happen. But what I do know is that it was not an optical illusion. It was not mass hysteria. It was not a figment of our imaginations. It was real. It is real. Spirit is real. And there is something beyond our mortal existence. And I find that an incredibly comforting notion that we do go on, that it's not just ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and that everything that we ever accumulate in our lives in terms of our love for each other, our emotions, our intellect, you know, everything that we ever absorb into our mind is not just lost when we die. You know, that in some way we continue on in another realm. And I often say, you know, to be touched by spirit is not a curse, but a blessing. It is an opportunity, a rarefied, unique opportunity to look through into the realm from which we come and into the realm to which we will return. And so to have those dimensional crossing over, that intermingling between mortal souls and spirit is miraculous to me. Absolutely miraculous. I mean, my life changed completely as a 12-year-old when I saw my first full body apparition and said, oh my God, oh my God. You know, I mean, the way I processed it was, well, this is really good news. You know, this is really good. You know, because he was harmless. He wasn't trying to do anything to hurt anyone.
Right.
It was only the spirit that was after my mother, and she seemed to really hate my mother. Oh, my robe is showing. Hold on. My ugly blue robe. Everybody teases me about my ugly blue robe.
Blue's my favorite color.
It's alright, we have one as well.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Don't worry, blue's my favorite color.
But I haven't gotten that far in the books yet, just, you know, juggling school and trying to read and all that kind of stuff. But like in the movie, did your mother wake up with physical bruises up and down her arms and on her body?
Oh, I want you to put the movie completely out of your mind. I'll tell you from the movie what you're allowed to believe.
Okay.
Most of it was fictionalized.
Yeah.
Most of it was. Most.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, my mother did have, my mother was physically attacked. More than once. There was no vomiting of blood. There was no exorcism.
Yeah.
There was nothing like that happened. What did happen was so much more extreme than that. I don't even know how it could be recreated with CGI. I don't know how we're going to do it when it comes time to make the movie. I guess we'll figure it out. The recent episode of Paranormal Witness, they tried.
Yeah.
They did a pretty good job.
They did.
They did, but, you know, still, you know the story inside and out, and you know even they scratched the surface of it. It was, that was a night from hell. It truly was, and I don't believe in hell, but I'll tell you what, if there is one, that night we were there. My mom posed some kind of a threat, I think, to the spirit in the house that was haunting and taunting her. She told her outright, I want you gone. You need to, you know, I mean, 'twas mistress once afore ye came, and mistress here will be anon. We'll drive ye out with fiery broom. I mean, she did this kind of chant or incantation, literally hovering over my mother, with my father laying right there beside her in bed, with my mom taking her hands and running her hands up into his hair and yanking his head back and forth. She thought he was dead. She thought he was dead. She thought she was next. It was very bad. And she was absolutely horrified by what she saw.
Right.
And the spirit that went after her, Bathsheba died in 1885 from a stroke. She died from paralysis. But the apparition that appeared to my mother clearly had a broken neck and spoke in language usage that was already out of use in the 1800s, that was more appropriate to the 1700s, which is why we loosely identify the culprit as Mrs. Arnold, who hanged herself in the barn at the age of 93 in the 1700s, after her husband died. You know, we'll never know. We'll never know for sure. You know, we don't understand what Bathsheba's detachment to the farm was. But she didn't live there. However, it was, you know, the word was that she killed a baby in that house, that she impaled it with a needle at the base of its skull, and it had convulsions and died. And we don't know any of the details. When we moved there, Mr. McEachern, very nice, sweet, old man, and he knew Bathsheba when he was a boy. And he was born in 1875, and we met him in 1971. He was almost 100 years old. So he knew her when he was a kid, and he said she was an evil woman, that she was bitter and angry, and she would beat her farm hands and starve them, and was just not a kind woman at all. But that didn't mean that she was necessarily the one that was after my mother. Her spirit was attached to the farm in some way, but she wasn't the one that was tormenting my mom. That we know of. I do my best in the books to try to, acknowledge all of the spirits and to tell their stories to the best of my ability based on not only the information that we had at our disposal, but my own sense of knowing them, my own intuition about who they were in life and what their intentions and motivations were. And I did that, really to the best of my ability. It took 7 years of my life that I was tethered to a keyboard in front of a computer screen to the exclusion of all else. 15, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week to write those 3 books. Wow. And the thing that's so strange and so cosmic is that I started writing the books on August 7th, 2007, and the last book was published on August 7th, 2014, 7 years to the day. And I had turned my material into my publishers for volume 3, but well before the publishing date. Mm-hmm. I had no control over the date that it would be published, and yet, boom, there it was. 7 years to the day. And then I went into this kind of emotional crisis, really. It was like, oh, I've done my job on this planet, Oh, I don't know where to go from here, I knew that it was my destiny to tell our story. Mm-hmm. And I so wanted to do it well and to do it with real heart. Yeah. And soul and, with real sensitivity. And I felt like I accomplished that, just based on what people say to me about how it affects them personally. And you're a case in point, my dear friend. It really touched you, and it prompted this exchange, So I'm glad that I devoted myself as long as I did, the way that I did. But I really had a crisis afterwards, and I thought I was going to die, that my purpose was served here, and that I was done. And George, about George Lopez, my paranormal partner in crime. Don't arrest us, officer.
He's not the comedian. Just let them know.
That falls down drunk in the casinos in Las Vegas. Yes, no, that's not it. He said, I have a story I'd like to tell you. And he told me the story of my latest book in a flicker. And we wrote it together, and it's a tough read. It really is. It's his idea. He carried it around in his brain for 25 years from the moment of implantation. And we took 18 months working nonstop. As hard as I worked on the trilogy is as hard as I worked on Flickr. And it's a brilliant, brilliant story. And it's going out all over the world. All over the world, people it's getting 5-star reviews everywhere. It's just an amazing story. And we've got a film company very interested in making a movie from that book, too. So, wow. That whole worry that I went through about my work here is done, my work here has just begun.
Yeah. It seems like every day your story keeps getting bigger and bigger. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think one thing we're gonna go back to the difference between the film. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to talk about the film that much, but
oh no, that's fine. I'm fine. I'll be talking about the film for the rest of my natural born days. And no doll, doll in our story, none. That was a very cynical way for Hollywood to infuse that story, to tell the story of the Warrens, because really the film is based on the case files of the Warrens. We're secondary to it. But to infuse that story and to prepare for the second movie, Annabelle. And I think that's very cynical and very jaded and created a great deal of confusion for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I have to clarify that. No, there was no doll. We never saw the doll. We didn't know the doll existed. Nothing. The Warrens did not step in and rescue us. The Warrens stepped in, and even though I believe it was unintentional, they really made matters worse, and they were in over their heads right from the inception. They didn't realize what they were dealing with and how powerful it was. To Mrs. Warren's credit, I will say that she did step into the house and say, I sense a malignant presence in this house. Her name is Bathsheba. And there's no way she could have known that because she had no background and no history on the house at all. However, she then blamed anything and everything that happened of a negative nature in the house on Bathsheba, which is how she became, the villainess in the film. It was gross inaccuracies in terms of that. My mother would never have ever done anything to hurt any of her children. To see on film it being portrayed as my mother being willing as a possessed person to plunge a pair of scissors into the heart of her baby girl, April, is beyond absurd. Yeah. It's beyond absurd. In fact, it's so absurd that my mother didn't even take exception to that. What she took exception to was the fact that they represented us somehow as godless heathens and, the Perron pagan.
Yeah.
And that's not true. My father was born and raised in the Catholic tradition, went to private Catholic school, was an altar boy his entire childhood, was destined for the priesthood when he met my mother, and that changed everything. My mother converted to Catholicism to marry him, and all of us were baptized and confirmed into the church.
Right. Wow.
First communion, all of us. Exactly. So to say that we were somehow, people who had, no spiritual attachment was a gross inaccuracy. And I think it sends out a dangerous message, too, because people who are normally, who are touched by spirit, who are integrated with spirit, who are haunted, quote unquote, are generally mostly very spiritual people, not people that don't have any connection to God at all. And I don't know why that is or why it's not the way that they portrayed it, what the rationale behind that is, but I do know that it created a misconception, a misperception of who we were as a family. And just because we didn't have a crucifix hanging on every wall didn't mean that we weren't, steeped in a belief in God. No, you don't have to, I think that did a terrible disservice to not only, a world full of paranormal enthusiasts and investigators, but to the general perception as a whole. As we were truly, deeply and profoundly attached to God. And in fact, when we had moments of crisis in that house, when things were bad and things were going very wrong very quickly, it was only imploring God's intervention that stopped it. That's all that stopped it.
Yeah.
Nothing else would.
Yeah. To kind of build on what you were just saying, from a more of a paranormal investigator view on it, I personally have never seen anything apparition-wise. I've heard stuff that was out of the normal. I have my own story for that, but I've never actually seen anything. What do you think could open up my eyes or someone else interested in the spiritual or paranormal, world to be able to see that stuff?
Well, it's not anything that any of us asked for. It was kind of plunged into our reality. But I do know that you can communicate with spirit, and that you can open yourself to it. And what I would suggest, what I frequently suggest to people who are willing to open up those channels of communication are, it's quite simple. Do you have someone that you've lost and loved? in your life, anybody that's passed away that you truly loved and had a connection to, a pure connection in heart, if you have, talk to that individual and let them know that they are still with you and that you would appreciate opening that line of communication with them. And then be mindful and watchful, and they will communicate with you in a way that is absolutely unmistakable. You will know that it's them. If it's your Aunt Vera who always wore Evening in Paris as her cologne, you'll get a whiff of it that will knock you over. If, I had, that just a case in point, just an example, something that is absolutely unmistakably attached and connected to your memory of that person. I had a man call me once that I had done an interview with, and he asked me if he could call me personally after the interview. He was from upstate New York. And I said, yes, of course. And when I answered the phone after the interview, he was sobbing. And I said, oh my God, what happened? He said, what you said to me touched me so much. He said, Dad just died 6 months ago, and I'm lost without him. I don't know what to do. He was my hero, my world, my everything. And I said, okay, John, just close your eyes with me and let's get quiet together and let's see if I can give you some kind of a sign from him that he's fine. And he said, okay. And he's like, the poor thing was hyperventilating. It was just awful. The pain he was in, the terrible pain of that loss. And I sat there quietly for a moment and I said, I see a baseball cap on the back seat of your car. And it's got 3 colors on it, and I think it's the Phillies, but it's not their colors. It's the colors of the Italian flag. I thought the man was going to pass out. It's like, oh my God, there's no way you could know that. And the message that I got was, wear it in good health, son. It was his father's baseball cap. That he had specially made with the colors of the Italian flag because they were Italian, and Phillies, they were from Philadelphia. And he's like, you just saved my life. You saved my life telling me this. Now I can go on. He said, because I've been willing myself to die so I could be with my dad.
That's so...
And have you ever experienced, like, dreams or anything like that as well?
My dreams are like a second life to me, and always have been. I dream in Technicolor. I do. I go on grand adventures, huge excursions. I almost hesitate to talk about that, darling, because it's almost like a whole second interview.
Just about your dreams.
Because back to kind of what Christopher was saying about like opening your own eyes and stuff. I've had dreams about like that kind of stuff, you know. When my grandmother passed away a couple of years back, a little over 5 years now, I would have like dreams about her and I felt her talking to me, but I have never seen her, you know. I've got feelings, but I've never seen her, you know.
Well, I see her. She's with you right now.
She is?
And she was very beautiful, gorgeous hair, really, really gorgeous hair, bright eyes, beautiful to the day she died.
Wow.
That's my Nana.
Andrea, I got one question. Do you think that the feeling and the spiritualness that you feel came from living in that house?
Yes. And it wasn't that I wasn't searching for it prior, because I've always been very spiritually connected since as young as I can remember, and back to my earliest memories. Very connected with nature, very connected with animals, very open-hearted and open-minded. and but moving to the farm changed everything. The two of you really love each other. You really, really love each other. I think that's so precious and wonderful.
Maybe a little.
No, more than you admit. More than you admit. A nice union here. Wonderful.
We're actually, we'll be celebrating our 2 years in less than 2 weeks, I believe. We'll be together 2 years.
Yeah.
Perfect. A match made in heaven. It's just,
I've been friends with him for 3 years, so yeah. I'm kind of still in the group.
I think you knew her before you.
Actually, I knew her before I met her.
Yeah, when I first came to the United States, I'm originally from Ireland.
No, really?
Yeah,
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
I could never have told.
It's actually funny because I was born and raised in Dublin, but my mother is actually from New York. She was born in Brooklyn, raised in Queens. So, and then her and my father met, and moved back to America, and then back to Ireland, and then back to America, and then, they ended up back at home in Ireland, so. And I've been here almost 3 years.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Oh, I'll bet you missed them. I'll bet you did.
Terribly.
She talks about them all the time.
They're actually finalizing plans to come see me in April, and my father has never been here since I moved here. So it's exciting. I'll have to tell my mother about you saying that about my nana now, because she's, her and my nana used to argue a lot, but I know she misses her terribly.
Yeah, your mom feels a lot of guilt about that, and your grandmother wants her to let that go.
Yeah.
Wants her, please give her that message from me that her mother wants her to, what your grandmother is saying, messaging through me right now, is that the reason we fought was because we were so alike.
Yeah.
And that all is forgiven, all is well, and to let go of any guilt that she felt about that she feels about that, please. So please give her that message for me.
And is my grandmother happy? Like, is she with my grandfather now?
Yes. Yeah.
Back to what she was saying. My grandfather passed in 2010, and the sad thing about that was my dad was there. He was my father's dad, and when they realized he had no more life in him, my dad actually closed his eyes and unplugged the machine. And
that's a great gift to someone, to facilitate their transition, to be there with them, for them to know that you're with them, is a great gift.
And oddly enough, my uncle, who's my dad's brother, went to my grandfather's house, and he told my father that the door opened and closed by itself, and he smelled an odor that my grandfather always used to have on him. And I mean, it scared him, but at the same time, it brought back to what you guys were talking about. How someone you deeply love and care about can come back to still be there for you and still present themselves to you.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. And I've actually had dreams with my grandfather ever since then. It's just shocking how all this came about.
I think it's wonderful. It's beautiful. Embrace it. Don't fear it. Don't be sad. Embrace it.
I'm happy. It's like, relief.
Yes.
I'm glad that she's okay.
Yeah.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, so...
Even.
Huh?
She's even frisky.
Oh my god, that's my grandmother. She never remarried after him. She died 13 years after him. He had lung cancer. So she died 13 years after him, and I remember the day before she died, I was in the hospital with her, and she told me that he was with her, and she saw him, and I was like looking around, and I was like, where is he? But she saw him, and she was ready to go be with him, and
yes,
she
are very much together, my dear. I promise you.
Yeah, I'm still kind of in shock how when you said something about your family members still being here after they die, and it brought back memories of my grandfather, because I never thought that could actually happen, that they could still come back and present themselves to you. It's just...
Believe, my dear. Have faith and believe.
Yeah. Whew, anyways, let's talk about, I know they're probably new to this, your sister Cindy, and how do you think she was affected the most spiritually and emotionally in the house? Because I know she went through a lot too.
He did go through a lot. Hold on a second.
Oh man.
It makes me emotional sometimes
Yeah.
to touch your loved ones.
Thank you so much for, giving me that relief and that comfort, and I would love to feel her. So, Nana, if you're here, come on now. Come out hiding.
Yeah.
Don't be surprised if she tugs on your beautiful hair.
Oh, she used to. She was one for that when I was misbehaving.
Uh-huh.
Oh, definitely.
But she said, don't be surprised.
Yeah.
A good yank. That's a way for her to tell you she's right with you, honey.
She used to rip the hair out of my head.
There's no need to mourn them. They're not really gone. What we mourn is our loss, our perceived loss of them.
Yeah.
That we can no longer put our arms around them.
Yeah.
Their physical form is gone, but they're not gone at all.
Yeah.
They're watching over us as lovingly as they ever did in life.
And one thing I'll add to that, my dad actually, he has so much of my grandfather that sometimes I'm seeing not only my dad but my grandfather at the same time, because they resemble each other and they act a lot alike. So it's just kind of like, wow, he's here but he's in my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even my mother says it. My mom says, wow, your father looks and acts just like your grandfather. And it's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anyways, before I get emotional, back to your sister Cindy. Tell us more about what she went through and how she got affected through that house, how she was affected.
Well, when Cindy was 2 months old, she had major surgery. And for all intents and purposes, she died on the table and was resuscitated, was brought back. And I think she came back a very old, wise soul in the body of a little baby. And when we moved to the house, if I get a cold, so help me God. Hold on, let me have a drink.
Don't worry, I'm getting kind of sick too. You're not the only one.
I really don't think that. I think I've just been talking so much, my throat is dry. But, and a few tears trickled down the back of his head.
All right.
But Cindy, the spirits came to Cindy en masse. In fact, the second thing that I remember happening at the farm, and we'd only been there a couple or 3 days, was Cindy came into bed with me, crawled into bed with me, and asked if she could sleep with me. And I said, yes, honey, absolutely. And she said, I'm scared. And I asked why, and she said, I hear voices in my room. Well, she slept with Christine, and Christine always talked in her sleep, so I thought it was Chris. And I asked her if it was Chris talking. She said, no, Chris is sound asleep. She said, I hear voices. And I said, well, what do you hear exactly? She said, I don't know. There's a lot of them. They're all talking at once. They're all saying the same thing. And I asked her what that was. She said, there are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. There are 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. Over and over and over again, she would take her pillow and put it over her head and try to block her ears. And it would get louder and louder and louder. She said it was like the whole house was shaking with their voices around her. And when it got so loud she couldn't stand it anymore, she jumped out of bed and flew into my room and hopped into bed with me. And she said that's what stopped it. And so she spent a lot of nights sleeping with me.
How old?
I thought I had my own room.
How old was she when she first witnessed this?
I was 12, so she was 8.
8 years old. That must have been really traumatizing for that to happen to such a young child.
Yeah. She was just a little peanut, sweet little peanut.
Did any of your other sisters get affected emotionally as much as she did?
Yes. But Cindy's the one that had the most encounters with spirit. Christine was the one most traumatized by the
Okay.
encounters that she had. Truly, no hands, no competition. Christine was the one most traumatized. She was the one it was hardest to talk with about it as I was trying to write the books and get everybody's personal perspective. It was almost impossible to get her to talk. She finally did. Cindy came down and said, Annie's working her heart out trying to tell our stories. You live with her and you won't tell her what happened to you. I know what happened to you. Now you tell her what happened to you. And I knew too, but I only knew it from 35, 40 years before. And I wanted her precise recollections so that I could make it as authentic as possible in the books. And Cindy got aggravated with her, and she's like, Christine, just do it. Just say it once, do it once, and be over with it. And Chris grabbed a hold of Cindy and just shook her by the shoulders and said, why did she come to me? Why? Why did she come to me? And she was talking about the apparition that had appeared, the entity that appeared to my mother with the broken neck and the head hanging off, and it just absolutely terrified her that she had seen what she did and tried so hard for decades to suppress it. And yet, again, there it is. And one night, I just told Cindy to leave her alone and let it be, that the book would go out without it. And one night, not long afterwards, and like a couple of days went by when Christine was very cold to me, would barely even speak to me. And I knew it wasn't about me. It wasn't resenting me. She was processing. And I left her alone. And then one night she came out of her bedroom with her dog Libby, and they came and sat on the sofa right next to where I was working at the desk. And she said, I'm going to do this once and only once, and this is it. And I said, okay. She said, just type as fast as you can. And I typed. My fingers moved at light speed for about 3 hours. And she spilled her guts. She told me everything. She answered every question I asked. And at the end of it, she just patted Libby on the head and said, all right, that's it. It's over. We don't ever have to revisit this again. Come on, Libby, let's go to bed.
Wow. As she was telling you this, was she crying, or was she trying to fight back the emotions?
Let me say that it was an extremely emotional night for both of us.
Oh, man.
Because that's the night that I realized how truly, profoundly affected Christine's life had been by what happened at that farm.
Wow, I'm getting goosebumps now. I just got a cold chill.
And is Christine your middle sister, or is she?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And is that the daughter that would have that would sleepwalk, or?
No,
Yes, Christine was the sleepwalker.
Okay.
Oh, so
okay.
Cindy was never the sleepwalker, right? Like, and they showed in the film.
No.
Okay.
No, that was Christine.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was not the flirt. Nancy was.
That's one thing we were gonna bring up later on.
I would never. If you wanted to know where I was, go find a book. You'd find my face buried in it.
No.
Nancy was. If it was male, she was in love with it, and that was that. And that was the distinction between the two of us, and they totally screwed that up. I guess they did that on purpose because I was the eldest.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was thinking.
I would be the one that would be more likely to be flirtatious, but nothing could have been further from the truth. Wasn't the least bit interested in boys, unless you consider Ralph Waldo Emerson a sex symbol. I mean.
Oh, man.
And he was dead, long dead.
Yeah.
Edgar Allan Poe, a sex symbol. H.P. Lovecraft, Nathaniel Hawthorne, Henry David Thoreau. Those were my men.
Yeah.